In part 1 of this video, we laid the foundation of the First Indochina War, while in part 2, we discussed the surrender of the Japanese army in Vietnam and the return of the French before we delved into the conflict proper. By now, it should be clear that the First Indochina War was indeed a politically complicated, blood-stained affair, made even more complicated by the concurrent Chinese Civil War and the rising backdrop of the Cold War. In this third and final part of our mini-series on the First Indochina War, we arrive at its devastating conclusion. Where we left off, the French General Raoul Salan had just taken over from General Dalat, who established the Dalat Line and killed the momentum of Viet Minh General Vo Nguyen Giap, or Red Napoleon's 1951 offensives. With Dalat gone, the Viet Minh continued its attack on French forces withdrawing from Hoa Binh, where they had dealt the French a defeat, albeit at a heavy cost, back in November 1951 after General Salan took over the defense. By the 22nd of February 1952, the French had finished their withdrawal to the Dalat Line, where they regrouped and staved off guerrilla attacks for much of the year. In October, Red Napoleon tested the French defense once again, this time at Nha San. But French hedgehog tactics proved too much for the attackers, who withdrew after taking some 6,000 casualties. Afterwards, the French strategically bailed from Nha San to prepare for a larger Viet Minh assault on French outposts along the Black River. With Red Napoleon applying heavy pressure to the vulnerable outposts, General Salan was looking to make a big play. On the 29th of October, he launched Operation Lorraine. In response to his 30,000-man offensive into Viet Minh territory, which was aimed at the district of Phu Yen, Red Napoleon simply withdrew his forces, sabotaging the French as they advanced. Salan had no choice but to can Operation Lorraine and begin a withdrawal. At Chan Muong on the 17th of November, the Viet Minh ambushed the French column, inflicting heavy casualties until French air support and an Indo-Chinese bayonet charge cleared the way for the column's retreat. Some 1,200 French troops perished in the failed operation. The following year, Red Napoleon switched up his tactics, planning to invade neighbouring Laos instead of smashing headfirst into the Dalat Line in the hopes of taking Hanoi. In May, General Salan was removed in favour of General Henri Navarre, who studied the successes of French hedgehog tactics at Nha San and opted to put a stop to the Viet Minh's invasion of Laos at a small town named Dien Bien Phu on the border. The French launched Operation Castor on the 20th of November 1953, dropping paratroopers over Dien Bien Phu so they could secure its airstrip. The paratroopers clashed with the Viet Minh, but by the 22nd, the town was in French hands. Under Colonel Christian de Castries, the French bolstered their defences, deploying over 9,000 troops plus 1,800 support personnel and setting up a hedgehog defence to once again defeat the aggressive Red Napoleon. But the Viet Minh general had learnt from his experience at Nha San. He wouldn't charge recklessly into the spikes of the French defence. Instead, he would lock down their airstrip with anti-aircraft guns, bombard the crap out of them with artillery, and place some 50,000 troops in the wooded hills surrounding the valley and the French position, which he likened to a rice bowl. On the 13th of March 1954, it began. Viet Minh artillery, mortars, and recoilless rifles opened up on the French position designated Beatrice. The French battalion commander was blown apart and communications crumbled. After the French were nice and soft, the Viet Minh advanced, breaking through the French defense with sappers and gunning their way to victory at this position. After this crushing blow, the French artillery commander in charge of the defense committed suicide with a hand grenade. He could do nothing to stop the Viet Minh artillery, dug into the surrounding hills, and he couldn't live with the shame of it. On the 14th and 15th of March, the Viet Minh laid waste to the French position, Gabrielle, with artillery, and then assaulted the stunned defenders, just as they had done at Beatrice. Here, as it was at Beatrice, the Viet Minh infantry assault cost the attackers more lives than they took, but the position fell nonetheless. At the nearby position of Anne-Marie, many of the defending troops abandoned their posts or defected on the 17th. So low was their morale at this point. For the rest of the month, Red Napoleon mostly left the French to stew in their own misery, while he prepared for a massive assault on the heart of Dien Bien Phu. At night, on the 30th of March, the Viet Minh 312th Division attacked the French position Dominique, seizing 2 of the position's outposts, but then biting off more than they could chew. As they advanced on the next outpost, French artillerymen leveled their 105mm howitzers and fired them into the division's ranks, 18th century cannon style. The French also fired on the enemy troops with anti-aircraft guns, ultimately forcing a retreat. The Viet Minh had better luck at the French position Elian, taking Elian 1 and most of Elian 2 on the 31st. French counterattacks at Elian 1 and Dominique were ultimately unsuccessful, but French Major Marcel Bigard managed to drive the Viet Minh out of Elian 2 with the aid of French tanks. The French also clung tooth and nail to the position Huguette, which contained the airfield and was located on the west side of the Nam Yam River, and French planes continued to do their best to resupply the men via parachute troops despite heavy Viet Minh anti-aircraft fire. By the 5th of April, Red Napoleon had switched up his tactics again. French artillery and air support were delivering some serious hurt to his ground forces, so he ordered his men to dig trenches. It was in these muddy hellholes that the morale took a turn for the worse, with soldiers being threatened with death if they didn't continue the attack, and the wounded often going unattended. Things didn't improve for the Viet Minh when Major Bigard bombarded Elian 1 to the moon on the 10th of April, and then followed said bombardment with small unit infiltrations, ultimately retaking the position. Over the Nam Yam River, however, things were looking better for the attackers. By the 22nd of April, the Viet Minh had taken the vast majority of the airfield, preventing French reinforcements from landing there. Without fresh supplies and troops, it was now only a matter of time for the French. In early May, Red Napoleon wrested control of Elian 1 and the remainder of Dominique and Huguette. The French at Elian 2 held on for a while longer, even against the Soviet Katyusha multiple rocket launchers the Viet Minh brought to the party. They could not withstand the detonation of a mine beneath the outpost, however, and with Elian 2 devastated, Red Napoleon sent in some 25,000 troops to mop up the remaining 3,000 French. The last words to come out of the French headquarters were as follows: "The enemy has overrun us. We are blowing up everything. Vive la France." By the end of it, the Viet Minh had captured some 11,700 French, of which over 4,400 were wounded. As many as 2,300 died in the battle, while more than 1,700 were branded MIA. On the Viet Minh side, the French estimated that they slew 8,000 and wounded a further 15,000 men. Either way, the French defeat in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu was a game-ending blow to the French in Indochina. While they were fighting at Dien Bien Phu, the 1954 Geneva Conference was in progress, and the French defeat influenced the conference's outcome. In light of France's ever-weakening position, there would be a general ceasefire. Vietnam would be temporarily partitioned into what was, in essence, the Communist North Vietnam, or the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and South Vietnam, officially the Republic of Vietnam. France would withdraw to the south and then get the hell out of Indochina, and there would be an election in July 1956 to unify Vietnam. Additionally, people could move between the north and south without hassle for 300 days, facilitated by the US Operation Passage to Freedom, which we mentioned in part 1. Not everything went according to plan, however. The new Prime Minister of South Vietnam, Ngo Dinh Diem, wasn't interested in following through with the July 1956 election, and many of Ho Chi Minh's Viet Minh soldiers stayed behind in the south. When the Viet Minh realized that a fair election was not on the table, they took up their guns, and this eventually escalated into the Second Indochina War, or as some know it, the American War in Vietnam. If you've stuck with us from part 1, thank you. You're a legend. Overall, what do you think? Did you know the First Indochina War was so intense? Were you aware that it set the stage for the Vietnam War we all know and love? Do you know anything about this 7-year, 7-month conflict that we didn't cover in any part of this video? And lastly, do you enjoy videos split into multiple parts like this one? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below.